Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep today, folks.
Yeah.
Global inequality.
Ooh.
Big topic.
Yeah.
Especially for our UPSC folks getting ready for that international relations paper.
Right. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But honestly,
Yeah.
this is one of those things everyone should care about a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. Understanding the world and how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. How things are connected. So we're going to unpack some serious knowledge here.
Okay, good.
When we say global inequality, I think most people picture like the haves and the have-nots, rich countries, poor countries.
Yeah, it seems simple enough on the surface.
Right, exactly. Deceptively simple.
Right.
But our sources for this deep dive,
Wow.
they go right to the heart of it. Like, first question, what does global inequality even mean? How do we even measure it?
Right out the gate, yeah. That's crucial, because even how you define the problem changes what you see.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Like, think about it.
Yeah.
The World Bank.
They love using income comparisons. Country A versus country B, who's got more money per person.
Okay, makes sense. Simple.
But then you've got the UN. They're all about human development. Less about straight cash, more about opportunity, well-being. Can people reach their potential wherever they're born?
So, two totally different yardsticks.
Exactly. And that's just the start.
Oh, there's more.
Our source mentions data reliability as a huge GE issue.
Okay, so like the numbers themselves could be
Messy, missing stuff, collected differently in different places. It's a headache.
So even before we get to solutions,
Yeah.
we got to figure out if we're even looking at the problem the right way.
100%. It's like you're a detective, right? Big case to solve, but half the evidence is gone.
Oh, I like that. That makes sense.
You might get a conviction, but is it the whole story?
Probably not, no.
Yeah.
So data gaps are kind of like, they warp the picture we get.
Totally. There have even been times when like massive data revisions happened.
What do you mean?
Like whole conclusions about whether inequality is increasing or decreasing flipped completely just because the numbers got updated.
Whoa, okay. That's kind of unnerving.
It makes you realize how much power there is in just framing the problem, even before we talk about fixing it.
You're totally right. And speaking of framing,
Yeah.
the time period we're looking at probably matters a lot too, right?
Yeah. Huge GE difference. Like looking back over centuries versus just the last few decades, two different stories.
Oh, interesting. So like big picture, long view, what happens?
You see this pretty clear trend, sadly. Gap between rich and poor countries, it widens steadily.
So like, give me an example.
The text uses a striking one.
Yep.
Back in 1800, USA's income per person, maybe 3 times higher than Africa's.
Okay, so a difference.
But by 2000, 20 times higher.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
Exactly. So long view, pretty bleak. But if we zoom in closer,
Like more recent times.
things get way more complicated. After 1980, it's not just one story. You see periods where the gap widens, periods where it narrows, sometimes at the same time in different places.
So it's not just this like steady march towards doom and gloom.
Nope. The 1990s, for example, gap increased then. Debt crisis in developing countries, tough transition to market economies in places like Russia, all played a part.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then, between 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis,
What happened?
actually impressive growth, often favoring poorer countries. So it's like a roller coaster, not a straight line.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing how this is way more nuanced than I thought. And we haven't even gotten to the fact that, well,
What?
defining rich and poor seems easy, but probably isn't.
Oh man, you open a whole can of worms there.
How so?
Because like, which rich are we talking about? Top 1%, top 10%, same with poor. How you slice the data changes the story you tell.
Wait, really? An example of that.
2001 Human Development Report. They found that between 1970 and 1997, the income gap between the richest and poorest 20% of countries actually shrank.
Interesting.
But if you compare the top and bottom 10% instead, gap had grown during the same time. Same world, same years, different conclusion.
So like, depending on your perspective, the problem's either getting better or worse.
It's wild, right? Like looking at a sculpture from different angles, you get a totally different view each time.
I like that analogy.
Makes you realize, even with data, supposedly objective, there's so much interpretation involved.
For sure. And then our source mentions the Zapatistas in Mexico.
Oh, yeah. They're fascinating.
I've heard the name, but honestly, I don't know much.
So they offer this really interesting model of development. Kind of pushes back against the usual globalization, capitalism stuff.
So a real-world alternative to the dominant narrative.
Exactly. They're all about self-governing councils, cooperatives, keeping things local, community-based solutions.
Challenging the top-down approach we usually see. Interesting.
And get this, they're super tech-savvy too.
Like using the internet and stuff.
Communication, organizing.
Yeah.
So it's not anti-technology, more like anti-exploitation.
That makes sense.
And they've been surprisingly effective, which just shows there are different ways to approach this whole inequality thing.
I'm already seeing that. This is so thought-provoking.
Right, and we're just scratching the surface.
I believe it. And I know our UPSC folks are loving this, getting those insights.
Yeah.
But here's a thought.
Uh-oh, what now?
Are we missing something by just comparing countries? I mean, we're talking about people, right? Not just national averages.
You're heading on a key point. It's the issue of within-country inequality, often overlooked.
Meaning?
The gaps between the rich and poor inside a single nation could be growing even if the gap between countries is shrinking.
Oh, interesting. Example of that.
Imagine 2 buckets of water. One's full, the other's nearly empty. You pour some from the full one into the empty one.
Okay, so now they're more even.
Right. But what if within each bucket the water itself is separating? Clear water on top, murky stuff at the bottom.
Whoa, that's a powerful image. So on paper, things look better, but in reality,
The situation for some folks might be getting worse.
makes you think. So how do we measure that kind of inequality?
We use something called the Gini coefficient. Basically, it tells you how evenly income is spread out within a country.
So high Gini coefficient equals.
Lots of inequality. Like, think of Denmark. Super social safety net, everyone's kind of taken care of. Their Gini is around 0.25.
Okay, pretty low.
Now compare that to Namibia. Gini of 0.59, huge difference.
Oh, yeah, big difference.
So living in a high Gini country, access to healthcare, education, even basic infrastructure, it all depends on your income. Way more than in a low Gini place.
So it's not just about the number in your bank account.
It's about quality of life, opportunities, even your sense of hope for the future. That gets impacted.
That's deep. And understanding all this,
Yeah.
it's crucial, not just for acing exams, but for being like informed citizens of the world.
Couldn't agree more, and we're just getting started.
I believe it. There's so much more to unpack here. But for now, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on global inequality.
Welcome back, everyone. We've been digging into how to even measure global inequality, and it's clear, it's messy.
Super messy, yeah. Lots of nuance. But let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay, what are we thinking?
What actually causes these inequalities? Like we've said, it's more than just rich versus poor countries.
Yeah.
But what are the deeper roots of this problem?
Right. Well, for starters, gotta acknowledge the elephant in the room, colonialism.
Yeah, can't ignore that.
Many of the wealthy nations today, they got that way through. Well, exploitation, right. Taking resources from colonized regions.
It's about acknowledging that the world we have now, it's not some random accident. It's built on power imbalances that go way back.
Exactly. And those historical legacies, they don't just vanish. They have ripple effects even today. Then on top of that, you've got economic factors.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Trade policies, who gets to sell what to whom on what terms, that shapes a country's whole development.
Oh, interesting.
And access to technology, huge. If you can't innovate, if you're stuck with outdated tools, it's hard to catch up.
So it's not just about past wrongs, but also the systems and rules in place, right, in AW.
Think of it like, imagine a raceway.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Some runners get a head start, better shoes, a clear track. Others are starting way behind, worn out shoes, obstacles everywhere.
Not exactly a fair competition.
And that's kind of how the global economy works sometimes. Trade agreements that favor developed countries make it harder for developing ones to compete.
So it's like existing inequalities actually create more inequality.
It can feel that way, yeah. It becomes this self-perpetuating cycle, hard to break free. And then layer on top of that, political stuff.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other mess.
Corruption, ineffective governance. That can make things so much worse.
Ugh. It's heartbreaking to think about. A country with tons of potential, but held back by its own leaders.
Sadly, it's not uncommon. Good governance, strong institutions, they're crucial for a country to develop fairly. And then, of course, social factors.
Okay, so we're talking like...
discrimination.
Yeah.
Based on gender, race, caste, religion, you name it.
Those systemic biases.
Yeah.
They limit opportunities for whole groups of people, right?
Exactly. It's layers upon layers of disadvantage.
And I'm guessing all these factors are interconnected, too.
Totally. It creates this incredibly complex web of inequality. Can feel impossible to untangle.
Right. But we can't just give up, right? Got to try to fix it.
Exactly. So what can we do?
Yeah. What are the solutions here? Is it even possible to fix this?
Well, it's not simple. Needs a multi-pronged approach. Gotta tackle the symptoms and the root causes at the same time.
So no easy answers.
If there were, we'd have solved this ages ago. But at the international level, we need fairer trade policies. Give developing countries a real chance to compete.
Makes sense. What else?
Increase development assistance, but not just blindly throwing money at it. Gotta be targeted, effective, address the root causes of poverty.
Okay, so more thoughtful aid, not just handouts.
Right, but it's not just a global top-down thing. Within countries. Invest in education, healthcare, social safety nets. Those are crucial.
Catch people when they fall, give them a chance to get back up.
Exactly. Address corruption. Promote good governance. Create opportunities for everyone to participate in the economy, not just a select few.
So it's both top-down and bottom-up then?
It's gotta be, yeah. Fix the systems and empower people. But honestly, beyond all the policies and programs,
Yeah. What else is there?
we need a mindset shift. We gotta stop thinking of inequality as inevitable, like it's just how things are, or that it's all about individual responsibility.
You're saying it's bigger than that.
It is bigger. It's systemic. So we need systemic solutions.
We're all connected, right? So creating a more just world actually helps everyone in the long run.
That's the key. We're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about people's lives, their chances, their kids' futures.
When we tackle inequality, we're investing in a better future for everyone. That's a good way to put it.
It makes the stakes so much clearer.
Yeah. Totally. And this is something our UPSC folks should keep in mind as they study international relations.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just about theories and concepts in a textbook. It's about real-world impact, how people actually live.
Absolutely. Understanding global inequality is fundamental to grasping so many challenges facing the world today.
Like what, specifically?
Conflict, migration, terrorism, even climate change and pandemics. They're often rooted in inequality, made worse by it.
So it's not just an ethical issue. It's a matter of global security and stability, too.
Precisely. It's like, imagine a spider web, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
One strand weakens, the whole thing becomes more fragile.
Irony's connected.
Exactly. And for our UPSC folks, being able to analyze those connections, seeing how different issues intertwine, that's crucial.
That's what we're trying to do with this deep dive,
Yeah.
right? Connecting those dots, providing that deeper understanding.
100%. And speaking of connections,
Oh, what connection are we making now?
let's bring this a little closer to home.
You mean?
Let's talk about India.
Okay, yeah. We've been talking globally, but obviously.
India is a huge part of this picture.
Immense diversity in terms of people and the economic development. Extreme wealth alongside widespread poverty. How does it all fit in?
And for our UPSC listeners especially, understanding how these inequalities play out specifically in India, that's key.
Right, because it's not just about income either, right?
Nope. Access to healthcare, education, basic infrastructure. Those are all unequal too. Creates a very complex picture.
And those inequalities aren't just random, right?
Of course not. Rooted in history, social structures, economic policies, it all plays a part.
Give me an example.
The caste system, for instance. Officially abolished, sure, but still casts a long shadow. Impacts social mobility, economic opportunities for many Indians.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And gender inequality, huge issue. Women in India often face discrimination in education, jobs, political participation. So much.
So many layers of disadvantage overlapping.
Right, and these are just a couple of examples, but they highlight how deep-seated and interconnected this stuff is.
For our UPSC folks, understanding those nuances is absolutely vital.
No doubt about it.
You'll be expected to analyze government policies, development programs, social movements, all through the lens of inequality.
Right. You got to know the history, the current challenges, the proposed solutions. It's not just about spitting back facts.
It's about understanding how it all fits together, the big picture.
Exactly. But honestly, this knowledge isn't just good for exams. It's important for anyone who wants to help build a more just and equitable India.
Very well said. So, knowing all this, what can actually be done to fix things in India?
Yeah.
What are the concrete steps? That's the big question, isn't it? The million-dollar question. We talked globally, but India specifically.
Yeah, where do we even start?
What are the solutions that actually work?
Well, it's not going to be easy, that's for sure.
No magic wand we can wave.
I wish. It's going to take a lot of different approaches, all happening at once.
Okay, so what kinds of things?
We need to invest, right? But smartly. Education, healthcare, Got to be targeted, reach the people who need it most.
Makes sense. What else?
Social safety nets. Got to catch people when they fall through the cracks, give them a chance to get back on their feet.
Yeah, so many people are just one bad break away from disaster.
Exactly. And then policies that actually create economic opportunities, especially for marginalized communities.
But not just trickle-down economics, hoping things will sort themselves out.
Nope. Got to be proactive. And that requires, honestly, a change in mindset.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
We got to stop accepting inequality as, like, inevitable or blaming it all on individual choices.
You're saying it's built into the system.
It's woven into the fabric of how things work, so we need solutions that address that at a deeper level.
It makes me think about the Zapatistas, actually. They went a completely different route.
Yeah, they basically rejected the whole traditional model of development, said, we're going to do things our own way.
And it's worked for them to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Shows you there's not just one path.
Totally. Makes you question what development even means. Is it just GDP going up? Or is it about people's lives actually improving?
Right. Like, we hear about India's economic growth all the time. But is everyone benefiting? Or just a select few?
That's where good governance comes in. Big time. Institutions that are accountable, transparent, policies that are truly inclusive.
So it's about making sure that growth is equitable, not just growth for growth's sake.
Exactly. Because if the benefits aren't shared widely, you just end up with more problems down the line.
Makes sense. So we're talking about a mix of things, right? Economic policy, social reforms, and, yeah, the political will to actually make it happen.
It's a tall order, but it's got to start somewhere. And honestly, it's not just on the government, civil society organizations, the private sector. Everyone's got to play a role.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. I'm sure our UPSC folks are taking tons of notes.
I hope so. This stuff is gold for that exam.
But it's also relevant for anyone who wants to understand the world better, right?
Absolutely. Global inequality. It touches every aspect of our lives, whether we realize it or not.
We've explored how to measure it, the history behind it, the factors driving it today, and hopefully some paths towards a more just future, with a special focus on India, of course.
And at the end of the day, it's about recognizing our shared humanity. We're all in this together, right?
Couldn't agree more. So to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration. And don't forget to like and subscribe